Welcome everybody, this is Denny with Why Is This True and Get Wisdom, and joining me today is Karl Mollison from teamarchangel.com and Get Wisdom, which is going to be starting up here pretty soon, the end of the month. And so today we're going to continue with our channeling series, and today we're going to, Karl's going to channel Carrie Fisher, who many of you will remember was a big star in the Star Wars film. And it turns out that Karl has already done some work with Carrie and her mother, Debbie Reynolds. And we are going to kind of jump ahead a little bit in part of our discussion, because we're going to broach a subject that where there's quite a bit of misunderstanding, I think. Well, not misunderstanding, or just maybe a lack of awareness, maybe a better term. But it's this whole idea of humans not having a very good grasp on the whole subject of time and what time really is and what it isn't and how we perceive it. So what I'm going to do as a prelude to Karl's introduction to what we're going to be doing today is read the last question that we're going to ask Carrie as a light being. So she did need a spirit rescue along with her mother, and Karl can tell us a little bit about that. But I want to read this question so Karl can talk about it a little bit, because we're going to ask Carrie this question. It'll be our last question, and we'll see what she has to say about it. But just as a prelude to kind of help everybody get on the same page, I'm going to ask it now so Karl can make some comments about it. So we have been told that all lifetimes, past, present, and future, are running concurrently in the now. Does that complicate the workings of karma through the law of cause and effect, or does that simplify things in ways hard for us to grasp? And then I was going to ask Carrie, if lifetime incarnations are parallel, how is it that past life karma plays a role in one's current life? So thanks, Karl, for joining me, and I'll let you tackle these subjects now for us.
Okay, well, all right. So I do a lot of healing work. I am a channel, and I do a lot of channeling of creator and other light beings. And this series has allowed us to talk with some people in the memory of the current generation who passed and others preceding, and get a perspective about who they are now and what they feel and think about their prior existence. And it's quite fascinating. And of course, as comes up along the way, we see a lot of people who end up earthbound when they transition, when their body gives out or they take their life or are killed. This is a common dilemma. 1 out of 3 people meets this fate. So I hope there'll be a little comment about that, because it's nice to hear from a living experiencer of what that is truly like. I knew Carrie Fisher and Debbie Reynolds both through their film work and their contributions as extremely talented people. And of course, Debbie was the nation's sweetheart. You know, that was like the word, I think, you know, the nation's sweetheart, you know. And she was Tammy, you know, back in the 50s or 60s or whatever it was. And phenomenal dancer and actress, and had an interesting life and a rich life. And Carrie was very close. They lived next door. There was a bio they did together towards the end, actually, and talked about their careers. And it was a kind of a reality TV documentary, and they commented on things, and you saw them in their lifestyle and so on. And I love Carrie in particular because of her tremendous sense of humor. And this is my life in action. You know, I recently saw on cable a special that she taped called Wishful Drinking.
Oh, yeah.
And it was a humor piece she did about her family and the nutty things that happened and what drove her to drink and her problem with drugs and alcohol and that sort of thing. It was very funny and very insightful. And she was very philosophical about it, and, you know, had a good sense of humor about it all, and extremely clever, brilliant woman. And so it was on my mind, because not long after seeing that, she passed away suddenly. She was hospitalized, coming off a flight somewhere, and died. And her mother died the next day, who had not been in ill health particularly. And so I got to thinking about that, and I decided to check and see if they're okay. And what I found is that neither of them were yet in the light. So because I did a spirit rescue for the 2 of them. And then after that, because I went and talked to them and recorded some answers to questions that I posed. And it was quite delightful, quite informative. And I got a lot more than I bargained for. And it was a period when I was trying to understand the phenomenology more than trying to save the world per se, other than one by one with individual destinies and so on. So I think it'll be interesting to hear her weigh in on some of these questions. And it's really fun to see people's reaction from the light about the human experience, looking down on it now. Because like everyone else, you know, they were Hollywood figures. They weren't involved with the problem of extraterrestrial manipulation and dark spirits and all this sort of stuff. But this we see again and again when people die and go to the light, and then they look back, oh my gosh, yeah, it's still going on. Oh, I didn't even know it while I was down there. I went in trying to help humanity, and then I didn't even know all this was happening because I came in unawares, you know, as an infant, right?
Yeah.
And these things are suppressed, and so this is what happens. So it's really interesting, and it gives us another kind of perspective. All right, so because light beings know a lot about how things really work, and because Creator is always present when they talk with us to kind of help and to monitor, there are things they're not allowed to say to us, because of the responsibility we have to make things happen. They're not going to give us all the keys to the kingdom and tell us exactly what's going to happen tomorrow and the next week and so on. But they do know a lot. And so it's an opportunity to get high-level information to help us further our understanding of how things really, really work. And one of the things as a healer I bump into that is fascinating is the looping of time across domains, past to present, present to past, past to future, future to past, future to present, present to future, on and around and around it goes. And we have lots of information that's come forth about people knowing they've had past lifetimes. Lots of information about this. And a lot of people recalling specifically past lifetime experiences. There's just beautiful works now coming out, books about this. And it's quite compelling data. Not to mention which, a high percentage of people simply hypnotized will recall past life experiences in some detail. And it's not like is dismissed in the media. Oh, everyone thinks they were Cleopatra and everybody thinks they were King so-and-so. No, they were farmers. They were seamstresses. They were, working in a livery stable or something, or they were farming, and bad things happen. Tragedies happen. This is a typical life, just like today. We scratch to make things happen and try and do our best, raise families and so on, but we have troubles. We've got relatives who are in distress. We have kids who can't get going and then crash and burn, people who die young, on and on. So one of the interesting things about this is that time is an illusion. Time is real, but we don't understand it the way it is in reality. We think of time as linear, and we see this in school, the timeline, the left is the past, and then we're in the middle, this is now in the moment, but there's a future going off to the right. So we're on this linear track, we can see where we were, see where we are, see where we're going. And we think of our past lives as way, way, way over to the left. But it turns out they have a huge influence on us. Huge. Most physical illness is caused by past life trauma. And one of the reasons is there's so many darn past lives. And that is a lot of trauma that was never healed. And it projects forward. And it's actually a looping forward. And so people understand they can actually heal things going back into past lives and resolving the trauma of what happened. And this is a deep discussion about the mechanisms and so on. But it turns out that is just scratching the surface of these time influences. Because we're not living in a linear track with all these kind of one track laid after another. All of our lifetimes are actually taking place simultaneously. And you'll hear this from spiritual gurus, that everything is happening in the now. Time is an illusion. And that is what they're talking about. Everything is happening at once. And that means all of our lifetimes, past, present, and future, are also happening. We have a future we're projecting forward, and a future life, a series of future lives, in fact. And so all these lives are running in parallel tracks. We're on one track, but our past lives are all parallel tracks, and our future lives are all parallel tracks. And there's crosstalk. So this is why we can be vulnerable to influences from other time domains, other times and places. It's not that it happened long, long, long ago and it's old and musty and buried in some deep, deep archive. Everything is on record, yes, but it's fresh. It's raw because it's happening now. It's hard for us to grasp.
Mm-hmm.
But this is what makes an understanding of this dynamic important, because it has practical implications. So we had this concept here to talk to a light being about this, and maybe getting a little tutorial, and at the risk of putting some people to sleep, I'm fascinated in because I work with this in doing healing all the time.
Right.
And there's nuances here. I mean, it's not just these parallel lives, but they have future extensions, because there's a future projection, not only of the current life, but all the other lifetimes. They have future projections that were being created along the way. Some of those have yet to gel. Some of them have turned into another parallel life. And so this is a very important dynamic that influences us and it influences human history.
Right.
For instance, we know that extraterrestrials go back and forth in time. They have the technological capability to do this. So they're going into the future and affecting future humanity. And then they come back and they tinker with the present and go back into the future and see what difference it made. And right now they're trying to figure out ways to drag us down bit by bit, subtly, and not so subtly, but we're too ignorant to understand it's their handiwork, even though it's right in front of us, and it hurts. But this is a game that's going on, and it has tremendous practical implications for us. So that's an intro,
okay,
to a complex subject, but
yeah.
It's one to help widen thinking a little bit.
Yeah, and I thought maybe this would be a good place to introduce it, just because of your familiarity with her. The fact that we don't have a whole bunch of questions, and some of the questions are more kind of maybe more mundane and kind of tabloid-ish a bit. But this is kind of like a head nod for the people that really like the Star Wars movies and a lot of the science fiction type stuff that a lot of us have been exposed to, where the whole issue of time travel and our lack of understanding around the whole issue of time, and then the idea that, with a better understanding, the more people have a better understanding of time, as you described it, the more able we are to solve problems, because like you said, it has practical applications. So, and if you don't understand something like time, and you're trying to fix something, lacking that understanding is kind of an impediment, So well, like you were saying, the Lightworker Healing Protocol there's a portion of that acknowledges this aspect of time, which then, if it's incorporated into the healing, it does have a practical application.
Well, I was sticking to the metaphysics, but thank you for plugging the protocol. And I was just thinking before you were saying this, I really should say something about how the practical importance relates to healing very directly, because I do this every day as I work on people. We do healing steps that are quantum healing, going backward and forward in time to make changes and working across time domains, so that we can repair the deep, deep roots of a problem that are manifesting in the current lifetime. And this is how the divine realm heals. And that is one of the most profound things I've learned working with the divine realm and focusing on healing issues. Not just getting information, but how can we facilitate an effective healing of something? And it turns out this is how God heals people. This is how the divine realm does it. They don't go in with a knife, cut you open, take something out. If you have a tumor, they don't do surgery. People use the term psychic surgery and so on. It's a metaphor. So the way the divine realm heals something like a tumor, they'll go back to prior lifetimes or into the future, whatever domain is influencing that person the most, that has brought about inner discord within the body, a series of karmic events where they're in conflict with themselves or others. And they'll heal those past or future experiences. And then the tumor dissolves. Okay? Because it's been undone. It's been uncreated, literally uncreated, by going into other time domains where the seeds were planted for that to beat up on the body in this life.
Right.
Very elegant, very powerful.
Yeah.
And it's a divine level problem. It's not something we can really do well ourselves.
Yeah.
We all have healing ability, but the divine realm has a lot more range and savvy to do these things.
Yeah.
So you can purposefully use this information, if you do it in the right way, to make things happen.
Yeah. And I think just acknowledging it and understanding it, even though it's difficult for us to understand it, is a help. You know, like if I know that my conception of time is an illusion, you know, then that kind of sets the framework for a better understanding that I would have in the future with respect to that. And it's a building process. It goes back into, like, you know, what is the consensus reality? Well, if more of us who have consciousness about that consensus reality can embrace the idea that we really don't understand time well, that's a big help to everyone. Even though you may not be in the healing profession, you just still can say, well, hey, there's part of me that doesn't really understand time very well, so I need to acknowledge that in my day-to-day life, you know, and that has a kind of like a building effect for all of us, helps all of us in a way. I mean, that's what I'd like to think. So with that, let's go ahead and get started, and we'll start talking to Carrie Fisher.
Okay, just give me a couple moments to get in the right state of consciousness and make the connection. I do it through Creator for safety and for accuracy, to protect the session from outside interference, outside influence, because there are many imposters waiting to jump in when people do intuitive outreaches, even in a meditative state. You might connect to something you don't want. You need to put safety around yourself, request it of the divine. That's the best way. So I really am scrupulous about it, and I think it's helping me to stay uncontaminated, and that's what I really work at, and that's always my intention. So
okay.
This is Carrie Fisher speaking.
Thank you for joining us. You and your mother, Debbie Reynolds, were earthbound spirits after passing and became attached to one another, and then you were both rescued. What was that like before and after the rescue?
This is a huge object lesson for all who may hear these words. This is something that was beyond my wildest fantasies and biggest nightmares. I was extremely naive from my position in a rather safe and cushioned life with enough money and enough loving people around me to give me support and help save me from myself, my own self-indulgences primarily. And this is on record, as your channel was blurting out to all earlier, my predilection for drugs and alcohol. So I am teasing him a bit. I promised him within his mind that I would not try to outdo my last appearance. So he knows he is in for a time, because I do like humor, and I do like to poke fun. But this question is of the utmost gravity and has the most severe implications. All are at risk, unfortunately, of finding themselves in limbo. And there are many risks and liabilities that determine what happens when people transition. Lack of faith is a huge liability. And being in a negative emotional state, fearing their own demise, unfortunately, will undermine them to some degree and make them vulnerable as well. There needs to be belief in a higher power and a knowing that an outreach will be made and they can be safe. This was not the case for me. I expected everything would come to an end, and I was ready for that and really was wanting that. It was extremely painful for me in watching my mother's mental and physical decline with her aging, and I selfishly chose to leave so as not to subject myself to witnessing and losing her love. And then I found myself in the darkness, but I was not alone. I was set upon by tormenting spirits of the darkest kind, and they began a relentless taunting and threatening that was nonstop and extraordinarily terrifying. I cannot truly describe the level of depravity and the sheer terror consuming my existence without a break of any kind. And even worse, my mother, who came to rescue me, sensing intuitively my plight, found me, but was herself trapped by that outreach. Because I was stuck, she became stuck, wanting to be with me and to help me, and having no better preparation for navigating in the hereafter, and not having a high enough vibration to assist with my rescue, shared my plight. We were close together energetically and calling to one another and sensing one another, but it was a sensing of one another's anguish as much as anything else, which was not helping. She was set upon as well and tormented and tortured relentlessly. The purpose is to prey off of this earthbound spirit we became and to tap us as a source of energy for their survival. So the more they can torment and torture an earthbound spirit, the more energy will flow and the more they can tap. So it is serving them in two ways. It serves their depraved perspective to see others squirm and suffer, and it rewards them with greater energy for their own survival. This was the most extreme and horrifying of experiences, and we will both always be in debt to your channel here for coming to find us out of the goodness of his heart and working his magic with his protocol to complete a successful spirit rescue for the both of us. And we, in fact, travel together to the light. And this was the most glorious of contrasts and is truly undescribable. It is going from the land of the demented and depraved, one of pain, unrelenting anguish and fear, to the most unexhaustible and glorious feelings of love radiating from Creator and the many light beings who work and live and experience in unity with Creator. This is where you all belong. You belong with us and are stuck in your earthly outposts, separated to a large extent from Creator's love and your awareness of that reality. Creator is with you and supporting you with every breath you take, all the life energy flowing in to keep your body going. It is all coming from Creator, but you do not feel the force of that love. This is the great gift we both gained in having people like yourselves who understand how this works and can be the savior for many who meet this fate. There are many others out there still, and we know the channel here works regularly to help many people check on their loved ones and find rescue, to enable them to work with the light callers who always come to give assistance but are not perceived. This is the dilemma. It is not they are unwanted. They are never rejected and turned away. They are never judged and condemned and excluded. It is always their inability to see the outreach, much as struggling humans do not feel the outreach of Creator or even their higher self sending them love and encouragement and suggestions from time to time. They may well crash and burn and surrender and end their lives directly or indirectly, and never have an experience of the divine that seems real. This will likely not happen when they transition either, because they are in such a sorry state. So having some healing for this dilemma may be needed. And that is what other humans who care about them, even as strangers, but have compassion for their plight, can come forward and request healing that will turn the tide and raise them up and make them able to be rescued. This is one of the greatest gifts you can ever bestow on a fellow human being.
Okay, thank you. Now that you have the light being's perspective, what are your views on mental health?
Mental health is in the eye of the beholder, truly. There is no absolute yardstick. There is no materialist definition that makes sense. It is all smoke and mirrors and hand-waving. The neuroscientists and the psychologists have little concept about how consciousness works, how the mind works, how the body is influenced and influences them in turn. And the end result is lots of mumbo jumbo with relatively weak capability to help people with serious difficulties. Most people will have emotional ups and downs because this is the playing out in the arena of life of prior karmic dilemmas that come up for attention, are triggered and rumbling within, and need healing. And the life mission is to work on such dilemmas, and they will, in fact, recur and provide an opportunity for restitution. If no plan is in place, the capabilities are lacking, and the support systems fall short in supporting people in a meaningful way, their problems will worsen and their state of mind will deteriorate accordingly, and they will fail and will go under. This may happen in lifetime after lifetime. At the moment, with the advent of better healing resources, there is an opportunity to make up for lost time and do much repair. But one must find a healer with the savvy and have the tools needed to truly make a difference. The mainstream completely fails to see the clues in the association between emotional trauma and mental illness in its true dimensions, which is the workings of karma. They see the correlation between acts of bullying at young ages and the emergence of schizophrenia in the late teen to early adult years. The correlation is quite strong because trauma is the predecessor of mental breakdown. This has a logic that is understandable to all. There are deeper layers to this. The one completely outside their awareness is the role played by demonic spirits, what your channel terms spirit meddlers, as a somewhat gentler, non-religious designation, but it is an apt description. These were the spirits attacking me and my mother while we were earthbound. We had spirit possessions during our lifetime, and these came along with us as we transitioned and continued to plague us in limbo. These spirits are bullies. The greatest source of bullying is onboard possessing spirits. This seems crazy to the average person, that the true mechanism of craziness is a crazy concept like spirit possession. I could write a screenplay easily with this very idea at the center, and it would truly be a hoot. And at the same time, a travesty, because all such ideas of the intersection of the paranormal with important needs and demands of life are typically meeting that fate. They turn into a comedy in a screenplay to ridicule the notion. So you have the films like Ghostbusters, who turn it into a joke with silly characters that people can laugh at. And it is all a good time, but of no real world significance or practical application. It is fiction, so it would seem, especially with such a treatment. This happens again and again across the board with every serious subject involving the paranormal or the extraterrestrial. So we would say the problem with mental illness is, first of all, the need to open up to the awareness of its true origin. That is the depravity of outside consciousness in the form of dark spirits entering the person's energy and then working relentlessly to bully them on a subconscious level and create such inner turmoil, inner doubt, inner condemnation, and fear that they begin to lose the ability to function and are turned to dark thoughts and dark perspectives themselves. And the worse it gets, the more the extremes of thought and behavior come into play. They engineer states of being where the person's own mind will create the perception of spirit attack. And these are the people hearing voices, having fantasies, delusions, and misinterpret the actions of people around them to make them appear sinister and a threat. This distortion and ability to hallucinate and self-deluding are created by altering the mind and are the hallmark of spirit influence. This is completely unappreciated. This becomes where the true healing is needed. It will not be healed by drugs that are only a kind of band-aid that masks the symptoms. There is a need to have spiritual healing, to remove the outside consciousness, and then begin to restore the inner balance so the individual will stop tormenting themselves through the power of their mind to do so, and the training put in place by their spirit overseers, their spirit manipulators. And this is true whether it is schizophrenia or any psychotic behavior. It is hugely important in the other disorders, obsessive compulsive disorder. It is true in a high percentage with bipolar depression and severe clinical depression as well. The percentages are quite high that it is spirits and spirit influence and spirit bullying that causes people to lose their way. And they cannot cope with life when the severity is too great. The entirety of the healing institutions are based on ignorance and are being constrained from probing meaningfully into the true nature of what is happening with the patients who come to them, trusting in them and submitting themselves to all sorts of manipulations with a downside that often creates additional difficulty for them to manage. So we see the tremendous need for enlightenment here. And as direct experiencers, both in physical existence as incarnated humans, in seeing how we were dragged down personally by dark spirits, and then seeing the extremes even more clearly and with greater vulnerability as an earthbound spirit, we can attest to the reality of their ability to render a person helpless and wishing only to die, to make it stop. The reason for my addictions was in part karmic from other lifetimes influencing me, but the flames were fanned by the onboard spirit attachments to encourage this. And in turn, my use of drugs and alcohol kept me vulnerable to spirit attachment by lowering my natural energy and its resistance to being penetrated by outside consciousness. This is the risk people take with recreational drugs and alcohol use. They are leaving themselves open energetically to spirit possession, with the potential that it can worsen to become more serious than some inner negativity. There is a spectrum of dark possibilities up to and including severe psychosis and suicide or homicide that results in totally destroying the life and the possibility of happiness.
Okay, thank you. Well, you answered the question number 3, so I'm going to move on to question number 4. Question number 3 was about addiction to drugs and the issues of entity attachments. So number 4, what aspects or storylines from the Star Wars movies tell the truth about the human situation?